Hey everyone, this is David Brown, and in this video I'm going to talk about my recent visit to the Waggoner's Gap hawkwatch on November 13th, 2022, talk about the birds that we saw, and just go through my photos and share some identification tips. This photo was taken from the lookout at sunrise. I left Delaware very early in the morning and got to Waggoner's Gap around 6:15 a.m. and up on top by 6:30. This was probably at sunrise about 6:45 a.m. And you can see it's just a beautiful view down into the valley, and you have quite a bit of elevation. This photo shows the main area where the counters and visitors go. And towards the back, you can see there's some areas where people stand up and are able to use scopes. And then as you get more off to the left, you can sit on the rocks, but it's a little less stable for finding a spot to set up a spotting scope, so I did not bring a scope with me. And here's a photo of me all bundled up, and out behind me is actually the direction that we were seeing most birds. So from this vantage point, the ridge extends off to the viewer's right, my left in the photo. That would be up ridge. So the birds would be coming along the ridge. So looking out in front, the way this photo is pointing, the birds would be moving from right to left. And most of them were out towards that valley a little ways, riding the front or the north side of the ridge. And Waggoner's Gap maybe isn't as famous as places like Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, but it's still one of the major hawkwatches in Pennsylvania. And you can tell just from the photos, maybe it's a little bit less comfortable, and maybe the view isn't that full panoramic view that you have from Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. But actually, Waggoner's Gap usually gets more golden eagles and northern goshawks. So just the raptor numbers are really good. And we had good northwest winds on this day that we visited. So we knew there would be a lot of birds, and we weren't disappointed, as you'll see as we go through the photos. Some of the first birds of the day were red-tailed hawks, which are one of the main migrants as we get into this November and end of season period. And here was the first golden eagle of the day. And I'll spoil it now. We had a total of 15 golden eagles, so it was a really good day. And looking at this one, you can see a bit of that golden nape, even though this was early in the morning, so not much light. The photo's kind of grainy, but kind of a small-headed eagle. This one does not appear to have any white patches in the wings, so maybe tricky to age. That's one ID tip. If you have a dark-winged eagle with a folded tail, technically you can't give it a specific age because some immatures do not have white patches. So ideally we'd like to see what the tail of this bird looked like in the top side view to be sure on aging. Here we have an adult bald eagle. Here we have another red-tailed hawk, and you can see this bird looks fairly lightly marked underneath, hardly any belly band at all. It looks like it has a white throat. So a lot of the red tails this time of year are on the more dark end of the spectrum, but this one's towards the lighter end. The counters had spread out some bird seed on some of the rocks, so we had some songbirds coming in, like this dark-eyed junco, and was able to get some pretty good photos of it. One of these classic winter birds that we get in Pennsylvania. We didn't have to wait too long for some excitement. This bird was coming at us just before 9 a.m., and as it came at us, you can see it's just a fairly big, bulky bird. And at one point it lifted up and I could see it had a long tail. So I was immediately suspecting that it could be a northern goshawk. And then as it got closer, you start to see just how big and bulky it is. Obviously it has the long tail that accipiters have. Looks really heavily marked underneath. A little bit of an eyebrow stripe. As it came closer, we can start to see that tail. Goshawks tend to have these kind of thin, wavy tail bands compared to Cooper's hawks or sharp-shinned hawks. It's kind of got that teardrop streaking like you might expect on a Cooper's hawk, but you can just see how bulky the chest area is. And we see that that streaking extends all the way down and onto the undertail coverts as well. On a Cooper's hawk, normally this lowest area in the undertail coverts would be clean white. It wouldn't have any markings at all. Another angle. As the bird came by, again, we see those really thin tail stripes. And this bird had one messed up tail feather, it looked like. I don't know if it lost it or just damaged it. But that was something we noticed as it went by. And again, we can see that eyebrow stripe. Some Cooper's hawks show a marking kind of like this, so it's not a definitive field mark, but something to look out for on goshawks as a supporting field mark. And this photo is not that great. But again, we can see that the streaking extends down to the undertail coverts, and we see that tail pattern just with those super thin, wavy bands on the tail. So first northern goshawk of the day, and actually it was my first ever northern goshawk for Pennsylvania, my home state. So I was pretty psyched to get one for the day. Here we have a juvenile red-tailed hawk. So we have the dark patagial bars in the shoulder area, the belly band. Juvenile, so no dark trailing edge to the wing and no red tail. Here we have another golden eagle. And the one thing I especially liked to focus on this trip was how they were aging, the golden eagles, because the hawkwatches I work at are not ridge sites. So we very rarely get a good topside view of the bird. But a lot of these birds migrating through places like Waggoner's Gap are more at eye level. So if they turn at all in front of you, you're usually getting both a topside view and an underside view. And the one thing that you're looking for on the top side is what they call the tawny bar, or these light markings here. If a golden eagle's a juvenile, it's more just plain dark on top. But after that first year, it starts to develop more of a tawny bar on the top side, or sometimes more of these whitish markings. So that's something they look for to know that the bird is not a first year or juvenile bird. Here we have a juvenile bald eagle, so we can see how large the head is on this bird. We also see white in the wing pit areas. That's usually your first sign that you don't have a golden eagle, is if you have white in this area. So this was a bald eagle born this summer, dark head, dark breast and belly, and then white in the wing pit or armpit area and through some of the coverts up here. Here's another juvenile red-tailed hawk. You can see the dark patagial bar and the belly band. And it's a juvenile, so it looks fairly light. You don't have that no bold trailing edge to the wing. And the tail, if we got a good look, would be not the red of the adults. Here's a flyby male purple finch, and even though the photo is pretty poor, you can still get a sense of that raspberry color. And here's a more distant photo of two purple finches. But if you focus on this top bird, you can see that it's a little bit reddish, and this tail shape is kind of distinctive. They have a kind of a forked tail, or the tail makes a little bit of a V. So even from a distance, they kind of have a distinctive shape. And we're also listening for the flight call. They have a fairly distinct, it's kind of a really short, almost metallic sounding flight call. So once you learn that, that would usually be your first sign that there's a flock of purple finches coming towards you. Here's another juvenile red-tailed hawk. You can see those dark patagial bars and the belly band, and no dark trailing edge to the wing. And we can see these pale panels that the juvenile red-tails show on their inner primaries. That's a good thing you can look for, especially when the birds are up high and lit by the sun. It's different from the translucent crescents that we'll see on some of the red shoulders. It's more of a wing panel. It's more of a square shape. Here we have another accipiter. You can see that long tail, and we can see the bands are fairly wide on this. It's got a large head. So this is a Cooper's hawk. Here we have a turkey vulture, which can sometimes be a confusion species with golden eagles. Since we have a decent photo of one, we can go over some of the field marks. Turkey vultures have small heads, and their heads have no feathers on them, so they look even tinier. But obviously it has that red coloration. We see the skin there. But it's the wing pattern that can sometimes make you confuse them with golden eagles, especially adult golden eagles that show kind of a similar, maybe dark light pattern like this. So you just have to be careful sometimes. Plus, golden eagles fly with their wings in a slight V, a slight dihedral, the same way that turkey vultures do. So from certain angles, especially going away, sometimes you'll look at a bird and not be sure if it's a turkey vulture or a golden eagle. Here we have another juvenile red-tailed hawk showing the same field marks. Dark patagial bars, belly band, no dark trailing edge to the wing, and no red tail. Here we have another golden eagle, and we can see these big white patches in the center of the wings. That's one of the big giveaways for golden eagles. We can see that it's not white in the wing pit area like we saw on the bald eagle, but rather it's the center of the wings. And we can see that relatively small head compared to the longer tail. Here we have another bald eagle, and I was also interested in watching how they age bald eagles. And this one they would have put down as a white belly, which is actually either a second year or a third year bird. So when they were aging bald eagles, there's kind of these couple distinct plumages. They would have juvenile, meaning first year birds. Then second and third years get lumped as white bellies because they're hard to tell apart unless you get a really close look at the wing molt. And then they have 4th year birds, which are the ones that kind of look like adults, but they still have brown where it should be white, and you have white where it should be brown. And then you have the full adults. Here's another juvenile red-tailed hawk, and even though the photo is pretty lousy, we can still see those pale panels or translucent squares. Although the shape's a little bit different when they have their wingtips tucked back in a glide like this bird. Here we have an adult red-shouldered hawk, which should be pretty obvious just from the coloration. Obviously a lot of orange throughout the wings and the body, and then you have this nice black and white pattern. And the tail looks dark, like a blackboard with thin chalk lines. And we can even get a sense of those translucent crescents near the wingtips. Although when the wingtips are tucked back, they look more like straight lines. So it just varies based on the position. Also notice that since this bird is in a glide, the wingtip looks a little bit pointed. When red shoulders are soaring, we usually think of the wingtips as looking very squared off, especially because the wingtip is made up of 5 feathers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Earlier in the season, when broad-winged hawk is more of a confusion species, we see that broadwings always show a pointed wingtip, even when soaring, because their wingtip is only made of 4 feathers. So just be careful this time of year. When you're seeing a distant buteo, you might say, oh, those wingtips look a bit pointed. That might be a broadwing. Red shoulders in certain positions can look like they have pointed wingtips. Here we have a flock of tundra swans high overhead. And one thing to notice about tundra swans is they don't really show any black, except maybe the feet that are trailing and the bill. But when they're high overhead, you don't see any black on the wings, compared to snow geese, which would be much smaller and be flapping much quicker, but snow geese would show black at the wingtips. So seeing these big white birds, kind of a slower flap, no black on the wingtips, these are tundra swans. Trumpeter swans, we don't really see migrating in big groups. So anytime we're seeing big groups of swans, we're just assuming they're tundra swans. You might occasionally get one trumpeter swan mixed in with a group of tundra swans, in which case the trumpeter swan would look much larger than the other swans. Here we have a black vulture, so we can see that gray head. We can see that the underside is dark and the silvery color is only at the wingtips. Kind of a short tail. Overall, a really compact shape. You can see the feet and the toes there, pretty much about as long as the tail. Just learn the shape. That's the main thing. A lot of people focus on the head or other things, but really they're not shaped that similar to a turkey vulture. If you watched my recent Hawk Mountain video, I had a very similar photo that I took there. And this is a sharp-shinned hawk, but it's got the same thing that I noticed last time. Look how pointed these wingtips look. Normally, we think of sharp-shinned hawks and other accipiters as having rounded wingtips. But this one and the one from Hawk Mountain show very pointed ones. The tail looks standard. You know, it's a long tail, very squared off, typical of sharp-shinned hawks. But I'm not used to seeing sharp-shins show wingtips that are this pointed, even when going away. And I think part of it might be because I'm normally not hawk watching at ridge sites. So I'm thinking that at ridge sites on windy days, sharpshins are tucking their wings in a little bit more, and that's what's giving them this pointed look. So that's something I want to watch out for in the future and see if I notice that on other sharp-shinned hawks that are going away from me. Here we have another buteo, and this one is actually a juvenile red-shouldered hawk. So we can see this one does have the more kind of squared off or rounded wingtips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feathers. Doesn't have that distinctive coloration of the adult. It's a little more plain. We see it does not have dark patagial bars, so we know it's not a red tail. Doesn't really have a belly band. It's got some sparse markings throughout the upper breast down to the middle, but it's different than that belly band that red tails show right in the middle here. We also see the translucent crescents near the wingtips, although the sun's not really shining through it, so they're not as bright as they would be otherwise. And we notice that the tail is actually relatively long for a buteo. So just from the shape and those other things I just mentioned, we know this is a red-shouldered hawk. Here's another look at a dark-eyed junco, because why not? Here we have an adult bald eagle, just really distinctive. White head, white tail. almost impossible to misidentify. You can see this one's tucked in a little bit, going into the wind. Here's another red-tailed hawk. Even from the side angle, when you can't really see the patagials or anything, you still see that really strong belly band. Looks like this bird might have a full crop. Here's another adult red-shouldered hawk. Again, just that classic orange coloration and then the black and white. And we see those translucent crescents near the wingtips. Here's another juvenile red-tailed hawk. Dark patagial bar and belly band. No dark trailing edge since it's a juvenile. And no red tail, although from this photo it's hard to tell what color the tail is. Here's one of the few birds we had to the south side of the ridge. You can imagine on a day with northwest winds, that wind is deflecting off the north side of the ridge. And so most of the birds are using those updrafts on the north side as they migrate along the ridge. This bird was on the lee side of the ridge, the south side, the side opposite of where the wind was hitting. And this, I believe, was identified as an adult golden eagle. No white patches in the wings and no sign of white at the base of the tail, although my photos did not come out very great. Here's another look at the same bird. It's just really hard to get the camera to focus sometimes when the bird is against terrain in the background. If it's against sky, the camera doesn't have a problem focusing, but sometimes when they're against an earth background, it's a lot harder to get the camera to lock on to the bird. Here we have some more tundra swans. Again, same thing we explained earlier. You can see that there's no black at all in the wings. Completely white wingtips. Here's another adult red-tailed hawk. We can see the belly band there, and we can even see the red tail on this one. Here's another adult bald eagle. And pay attention to how big the head is. You can see the head is nearly the same size as the tail, so it looks more evenly balanced, I think, than golden eagles, which look like they have a tiny head and a much longer tail. Here's another adult red-shouldered hawk, and with the sun hitting it, you just get that orange color lighting up. Makes it pretty easy to identify. There were a handful of common ravens around, so we can see that the tail is the first thing that jumps out to me. You can see the outer tail feathers are quite a bit shorter, and then the central tail feathers are longer. Just a different shape to the tail than we see on crows. Really big bill, kind of a shaggy throat. Just overall kind of a different shape than we see on crows. And they were soaring around and having a good time with the wind. I think we had a group of 6 at one point and probably a few more. So not a huge number, but enough to keep us entertained. Here's an eagle that might give you some trouble. If we had a good look at this through a scope, we would see that the head is actually quite white. Not much white at all on the underside. Maybe a little bit of splotchiness. Hard to tell. Is that a photo artifact or is it real? The tail's kind of a mess, maybe missing some feathers. And looking at it, it's hard to tell, is that head actually big compared to the tail or not? But this is actually an immature bald eagle, probably like a 4th year type. It's getting the white head and white tail, but again, still has some dark where it should be white and some white where it should be dark. Here's another look at that same bird up top with another bald eagle. This is a white belly one, so a 2nd or 3rd year. You can see they're the same shape, and from this angle we can see that the top bird does have quite a large head. So 2 immature bald eagles. Here's an adult red-tailed hawk and a soar, dark patagial, dark belly band, and it's an adult, so it has a dark trailing edge to the wing. And with the tail fanned out, we can see it's that red color of the adults. And here's an adult red-tailed hawk going away in a glide. But again, we can see the dark patagial bars and the dark belly band. And we can see the dark trailing edge to the wing, letting us know it's an adult. And the tail is folded, but it maybe looks a little bit reddish. And it looks like this bird has a full crop. And again, a full crop just means it has a bulge in this throat area because it has eaten recently. In addition to the juncos, we also had some white-breasted nuthatches checking out the bird seed. Here we have another immature bald eagle. You can just see it's got a lot of white throughout the underside and throughout the wings. I usually tell people anytime you see eagles that look really splotchy like this with like white and brown splotchy areas, that's going to be a bald eagle. The golden eagles, if they have any white at all, they're in very clean patches in the wings and the base of the tail. They never look splotchy like this underneath. Here we have a northern harrier, and it's not the greatest photo because the bird was quite distant, but we can still get a sense of that lanky shape. So long tail, kind of long lanky wings. This is one of the so-called brown types, so either an immature or an adult female. compared to the gray ghost adult males, which are more silvery and white in color. Another juvenile red-tailed hawk with the dark patagial bars and belly band. An overall light color to the wings because there's no dark trailing edge. Here's another look at a raven, and we can see how big that bill is. And also, you can see the eye here, how it's kind of that milky white color. That's what they call the nictitating membrane. It's like this little flap that folds down over the eye that has something to do with protecting it or cleaning it. But sometimes when you take photos of birds, you just happen to catch the moment when they close that nictitating membrane. Makes them look a little bit spooky. Okay, another large dark bird. Looks like an eagle. And what can we tell from this right away? Well, we see that there's a lot of white in the wing pit area. And what did we say about that? Those are the immature bald eagles that show the white in that area. And this bird looks like it might also have a full crop with that bulge here in the throat area. For a while, midday, we had some pretty decent groups of common loons migrating through. And of course, being up on a mountain, sometimes you get decent looks at the birds as they pass over. I think the largest group that we had was around 25 or 30 loons, and I think we ended up with 75 or 80 total for the day. So just a really good flight of common loons. And it's a species we haven't really been seeing migrate much this year here down here in Delaware. I think we've only had them on 2 days. A little bit unusual, but fun to see the bigger numbers, especially when you get large groups coming through together. Here we have another side view of a red-tailed hawk, and you can see that belly band and a little bit of the patagial bars. Here we have another golden eagle, so we can see a small head, and you can see some white patches in the wings, maybe not the best angle. Here we have another adult red-tailed hawk. You can see the dark patagial bars and the belly band. The dark trailing edge of the wing gives the wing a little bit of an outline. Just classic red-tailed hawk in a soar shape. So I show all these red-tailed hawk photos just trying to help you get that shape in your mind, because that's really the shape that all other raptors are compared to. Here we have another immature bald eagle. This one looks like maybe a 4th year type with the white head and a little bit of white still spread around the underside. We can see a lot of white in the wing pit area. These aren't the patches in the center of the wings like we would see on a golden eagle. Plus the head looks quite large and it's a whitish head. So bald eagle. Here's another look at a common raven. And this is a shape that's good to learn because a lot of times you might see a raven off in the distance and be trying to figure out what kind of hawk you're looking at. And it turns out it's not a hawk at all. So it's good to see ravens in different shapes. And obviously this one's got kind of bent wings and the wingtips are folded back, giving it kind of a pointed winged look. Here's a bird we had in the afternoon, and there were actually 2 birds together that were kind of going at each other. And I put my binoculars up. First bird was a red-tailed hawk. Second bird was this one, and the first thing I saw was that it had a long tail and that it was pretty much as big and bulky as the red-tailed hawk. So this is the top side view of a northern goshawk. And you can get a little bit of a look at that eyebrow, that white eyebrow above the eye, and kind of thin tail banding. But this is a bird that you didn't really need to look at that close. You didn't need to look at like how far down the streaking was on the underside. Just seeing the size and the bulk of this bird and seeing the long tail and knowing it was an accipiter, it was obvious right away that it was a northern goshawk. And here's an underside look at the same bird. Again, we can see that white eyebrow. You can see that long accipiter tail with kind of thin wavy tail bands. But overall, just a huge, bulky bird. I would say this one's a little more on the lightly streaked side, at least from what I could tell in my photos. Fairly heavily streaked on the upper breast, but as you get down lower, from this distance and quality, you can't see any streaking at all. So maybe on the more lightly marked end for goshawks, but just that size and bulk doesn't lie. And like I said, right away, if you're used to seeing Cooper's hawks, when you see this bird go by, it just catches your eye at how massive it is. And one more photo of the same northern goshawk going away. And from this angle, you might even be thinking it was a buteo just because of how bulky it is and just that kind of real stocky shape that it has. Here's the topside view of another golden eagle down over the valley. And again, we can see that tawny bar that I was talking about earlier. So juveniles do not show these markings here, these light markings on the upper side. But anything older than a juvenile does. So if it had these markings and it also had white in the wings, we would call that a subadult. This bird looks like it might be a full adult. We see these markings, and we also see that there's no white patches in the wings, at least not on the top side. We'd of course want to see an underside shot to confirm that. And I don't see any white at the base of the tail. And here's an underside shot. I'm not sure if this is the same bird or not. It just looks dark underneath. You can see how small the head is. You can, from this angle, it's not even really sticking out at all. Here we have another golden eagle. This one we do see some small white patches in the wings. So we know that this one is not a full adult. The adults do not have white patches in the wings. Juveniles and subadults usually have white patches, but not always. And again, with the sun hitting it, we can see that golden nape or the back of the neck. That's where the name golden eagle comes from. Just an overall small-headed eagle, white patches in the center of the wings, golden nape. That's all you need to see. Golden eagle. Here's a look at a golden eagle in a soar. Again, very small head with a golden nape as the sun hits it, white patches in the center of the wings, and a white base to the tail. Classic golden eagle field marks. Again, this one is not an adult because it has white patches in the wings, so either a juvenile or a subadult. To confirm which, we'd want to see the top side to see if there's a tawny bar or not. Another look at a golden eagle, kind of the same plumage as the last one, maybe a little farther away. It might even be the same bird, I'm not sure at this point, but anyway, it's a little less quality, but still, you see that really small head compared to the tail, and the white patches in the wings and the white tail base. That's all you need to see to know that it's a golden eagle and not a bald eagle. Here's an even more distant and lower quality view of a golden eagle. And even from just this photo, you would be able to say for sure that this is a golden. Just look at how small the head is, the overall shape of the wings. It's obviously not a bald eagle because of how small the head is. It's not a turkey vulture, so golden eagle. Here we see the top side of a golden eagle, and I don't see any tawny bar on the top side, so I think that we're safe to say that this one is a juvenile, meaning first year. And we see that it has some small white patches on the top side. On the bottom, it would show larger white patches probably. And we see it's got a completely white tail base. So the juveniles, first years like this, they would have a completely white tail base. Over the next few years, it would be replacing tail feathers, and you would see those replaced feathers. But again, we're just seeing that it's really clean on top, no tawny bar, so juvenile. Another photo of a golden eagle. We can see that golden nape. You can see the white patches in the wings and the white tail base. This is just classic golden eagle plumage. Here we have the top side of an adult red-tailed hawk. And so, of course, we have that classic red tail. And this one's got a pretty bold black band near the tail of the tip. Might call it a subterminal band. Not all red tails show that bold of a subterminal band. And here's an underside shot, and I believe this is the same red tail as the last one. And we can see that it's fairly heavily marked underneath. You know, it's got pretty strong patagial bars and a big belly band. It looks like the throat is dark, so probably a bird that came down from pretty far north. Here we have another golden eagle, and for this one, we're basically just going off of the shape. It's not really a posture that you would ever see a bald eagle in. You know, you kind of see this small-headed look to it. Wings elevated into a slight dihedral, or even maybe a modified dihedral, which means that the wings go up and then flatten out. I always think golden eagles just look a little more smooth. They look a little more curvy than bald eagles. Bald eagles usually look kind of rectangular and squared off, kind of like an older car. You know, there's that certain period where cars were all really boxy looking. Golden eagles look a little bit more like a sports car. They have some curves to them. Another look at a golden eagle, and we can see that the tawny bar, or that little bit of white coloration on the upper wing. So we know this is not a juvenile. Another look at a red-tailed hawk. The quality's not that good, but you can get a hint of the belly band, and just the shape and everything is perfect for a red tail. Here's kind of an interesting phenomenon they were explaining to us. I think they called this the Tuscarora ripple, and they said this only happens after mid-October. And it's when the sun starts to go down this time of year you see the shadows that really show the way that the ripples in the mountain. And this stretched kind of along the whole horizon. This was the next ridge to the north of us. So just really cool as the sun was starting to go down a little bit, just to be able to see a little bit of that shape, that ripple in the mountain ridge. Here's another golden eagle showing that tawny bar on the upper side. So again, we know it's not a first year juvenile bird. This would be either a subadult or a full adult. Here's the underside of the same bird, and I believe this was identified as a full adult. No white in the wings or the base of the tail. But again, just look at how small the head of the golden eagle is. It's not that big head that you see on bald eagles. Very small head. Kind of a curvy look to the wings. Long tail. Golden eagle. Here's another red-tailed hawk, and this one's pretty big and bulky looking. Maybe has a full crop here. Just a really awesome looking bird. See the patagial bars, the belly band, everything. This is probably a northern that's migrated down from the boreal forest of Canada. Here we have another golden eagle that really shows that tawny bar on the top side. So whenever you're looking at this, you know it's not a first year bird. So either a subadult or an adult. Looks like it has some white in the base of the tail. I think they called this one a subadult. And another golden eagle, kind of a lousy photo, but you get an idea of the sense of the shape and the golden color of the head and nape. Another golden eagle showing that tawny bar on the top side. And another golden eagle going away, showing the underside of the wing. Here we have a couple cedar waxwings. They have kind of a distinctive shape to them. You can see a little bit of the eye mask even in this low quality photo. And you can see that the tip of the tail is a slightly different color. Waxwings are pretty distinctive just because of their coloration and the way they flock. And a lot of times when they fly by, you hear that really high-pitched call that they give off. Here we have another bald eagle, and this one looks like it has a little bit of white still on the underside, unless that's just an artifact from the photo. But if that's real, then it would be almost a full adult, maybe like a fifth-year bird. And we ended the day with one last flock of tundra swans. If we take a look at the hawk count report from November 13th, we see that their total migrants were 28 bald eagles, 1 northern harrier, 4 sharp-shinned hawks, 5 Cooper's hawks, 2 northern goshawks. For buteos, we had 5 red-shouldered hawks, 49 red-tailed hawks, and we had 15 golden eagles for a total of 109 migrants. And you can see that they also included the times of all of the eagles with the times and the ages. So here under bald eagle, 6:59 a.m. was a juvenile. You see that J. A for adult, WB for white belly. Again, those are your second and third year birds. And same thing on golden eagles, adult. Here they use SA, sub-adult. Here you have one UA, unknown age. So it's just something that's some sites do to keep track of the times and the ages of the different birds. And you can see they got me here under the visitor list, David Brown. I'll also put a link to my eBird checklist from the day. You see I had 36 species, and you can check out all of my photos here on the checklist. All right, I hope you enjoyed this summary of what I saw at the Waggoner's Gap Hawkwatch, which again is north of Carlisle, Pennsylvania in the USA. And Waggoner's Gap's a little unique in that they actually run their count through the end of December. Most hawkwatches end at either the end of November. I know Hawk Mountain goes until mid-December. Waggoner's Gap actually goes all the way until the end of the year. So you still have some time to go check them out. At the end of November, this time of year, they're still getting a decent number of golden eagles. And this is actually the time that they might get some adult goshawks. So the migration's starting to slow down a bit, but it's sort of a time period that you're going for quality over quantity. You might not see a huge number of birds total, but the ones you will see will be things like northern red-tailed hawks, golden eagles, northern goshawks, bald eagles. So still plenty of time to go out and do some hawk watching. Just be sure to bundle up because it's been pretty cold lately, even here in Delaware. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.